So I've got a segment here which is meant to be a quick refresh as to what's the big box. This isn't meant to be deep dive. It isn't meant to be training course. It's like just a refresher. And if I can get through the points, we can then discuss them. If they're significant enough and people want to contribute, chip in, but we're kind of running out of time. But what we're positioning in big is that we've got a framework that helps us get from business purpose to goals to strategy and objectives, targets, and challenges that go through all our different functional areas. And in Tony's language, into the different portfolios or into functions and product groups and change portfolio, whatever it is. But they're into areas where we have accountable people across which we can enable governance, and we're looking to advance the organization. So that's the purpose, a mechanism to enable this to happen. And again, just whizzing through this stuff, the business support component is it talks about orchestrating governance, about operating this decision making stuff, and there are a couple of bits just to remind everyone in that this is quite a feast for us, but for many of us are familiar with portfolios, programs, and projects, and we're very happy and capable within our world to make that sort of stuff happen. The only problem is that we've got to sit alongside other functions which do things different ways. So how do we work alongside them doing similarly complex and sophisticated things? Whether we have all of these or not is another matter. This is just a logical picture. But what we have to do is, I guess, make sure that all aligns to purpose, vision, and strategy. We need to pull that together to make sure a decision making is consistent across these things. And stop me if this is just madness. We're probably using the same customers and suppliers, so a common commercial function. I don't think there's any much argument on that. But we have to deliver value, and we've got to deliver value across these different areas. We need to share the same information. We've got dependencies that go between these areas very typically when we're trying to deliver stuff. We've got typically the same resources, or at least we'll need to use resources from the same areas. So how do we basically enable these different worlds to all work together across commonly shared things and to actually function and have a chance of succeeding? And that's the big proposition, that we kind of have some capability that enables these different areas with their own internal governance and support functions to be together and coherent, supported by common capabilities that go across them. That's a big diagram.
Common data, common information has to be the underlying rock that everything sits on.
Yeah.
Because if people are using different metrics.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I can't quite hear you. Sort of very faint.
Oh, sorry. Common data, common information standards, to me, are the foundation that all of that depends on.
Correct, and it's getting even more important in this brave new world that we're moving into.
Yeah.
So park that thought, folks. So park that thought. So this is the big proposition. The next one is, well, can we get this capability through its can we operate agendas? We talked in accountability, and I'm not going to go into this in detail, but we talked in accountability being absolutely fundamental to deliver strategy. And to be accountable, we need stakeholders, we need plans, we need resources, funds, we need to behave commonly and consistently. And we talked in accountability about operating not completely consistently, but there's if we're looking to operate a point of accountability or operate a particular point of governance, we need to understand our objectives, targets, and challenges. We need to understand our policy and process. We need to understand performance, what the forecasts are, what the issues and risks are. We'll have escalations coming from other areas that affect us, and we'll need to get governance outputs out. We'll need to communicate decisions and actions, communicate, escalate, all that sort of stuff. This is another common diagram, and there's clearly dependency between two different areas. And Philip, you had a point to develop.
I was sticking my hand up in case you didn't let me talk then. I could hear the enthusiasm. So most guys on here are talking about big ticket items, portfolio management in huge organizations. Um, the work that I've been doing in AI over the last 8 years, I've been focusing on small businesses. And small businesses, even of 5, 10, 15 people, are hugely complicated. So when you extrapolate that up to the big businesses, they get so big, so complicated that this lack of accountability, this lack of traceability is quite easy to hide behind because there has never been any tool that you can actually, or anything that we can fall back on that can pull all that together. Now, I suspect most of you have used AI tools in some form or another, and the brilliance of them, you take a fantastic tool like Google Notebook LM, you can throw 50 documents in there and ask it a question, and it'll go through, and 30 seconds later, it will produce a summary of all of those documents, or what are the key points, or what are the overlaps. And I think this is what we're moving into here. You know, the big core principle is that data leads to information, information leads to governance. Yeah. But traditionally, our knowledge came from structured databases, and we built tools like data warehouses and data meshes, and people are still talking about those. But the reality is that that knowledge actually sits largely in what we call unstructured data. So, emails, documents, meetings, telephone calls, and all of these things. Actually, we're moving into a world where we can interrogate all of those and we can produce a joined up version very quickly. I mean, Veronica was talking earlier on about timesheets, and I was listening to myself, well, the age-old world of filling in timesheets surely is gone because your computer knows what you've been doing all day long and should be able to give you a feedback at the end of the day that says, this is what we've achieved together. Anyway, that's another neighbor. So to me, what this is all about is building an intelligence layer around all the existing functions, people, accountability, down to the processes, down to the programs, down to the systems, down to the data structure. And that leads us into our language layer, because that's absolutely vital. We've got to have this contextual AI language layer if AI is going to work, so that a customer is a customer in every single scenario. You can't have two people asking for a customer and we get two different answers. So that intelligence layer is really important. And I'm really sorry, but there was one of the guys, again, my hearing is so awful, I was struggling, but you talked about visibility. And to me, I just wrote that straight down, visibility. That is a key benefit that using AI type tools can bring to these extremely complex situations. How do we fixate on the bits that are really important at this moment to me, and yet still relate back to all the other functions that people are doing without getting lost in them? And how do the senior leadership, so if we talk about a senior manager looking in at this, they can get a pretty good idea of what resources are going on where and how that is relating to their strategic targets. Keep going back to a chairman of mine many years ago said, sounds to me, Philip, like we're becoming very busy fools. Are we actually going to get anywhere? And that's always stuck with me. I know lots of people use it, but busy fools is a really key bit.
No, it's interesting. It sounds like it sounds like we can't hide any information from the higher levels anymore with AI.
Well, you can, because at the moment everything's fractioned all over the place, and actually the AI will make it sound incredibly professional, but will give you completely the wrong answer.
Well,
And
yeah, it's like the
I
old.
don't think that's
Sorry.
the point. I think the point is to make people better at what they do because they will have the information to do their jobs better. Yes, some people immediately go, yeah, we can slash costs. Yeah, I think lots of people have tried that, and actually they're finding that they can't slash the costs because it all comes back to bite them in the arse. But maybe that's the next CEO's problem.
It's a bit like the old Russian proverb, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
If you translate that into English from the original Russian, it used to come out invisible idiot. So, I mean, and that's
Well,
the problem. It's making sure that the information you derive from it, and therefore where does it go from there, and who has the ownership of that information to make decisions. But you're right, that's the big problem, is people getting the right information, decision-ready information and correct information for what's needed, not what people want to give. And that's
yeah.
oh,
It's
I'm just
operating
saying,
it.
I think it's perfectly possible now.
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's an opportunity there that and go back to Philip's point about our complex organizations. I mean, we this is again a little simple example you'll find in the big framework about how organizations there'll be teams, departments, areas, projects, programs, whatever. We'll have a map of all this accountability. It'll be vast. It'll be huge. We might not even be able to visualize it. But if we don't have line of sight from the most important things that we're trying to achieve to what we're actually doing, how are we going to achieve those most important things? Did you want to add anything briefly on this, Philip?
Well, no, line of sight, it's not just structure on a page. It's whether people can access the knowledge behind it, And I keep going back to this word accountable, because that's what drives things to be said, is that someone's name is on there and they're going to make heaven and earth to make sure that it happens. And if it's not happening, they're going to shove it up the line and say, this is out of line. But I keep going back to the basic principle. We have an organization has a purpose that the board are driving it towards, and they have designed a strategic route map to get there. Yeah. And all of this change, or business as usual, or whatever it is, the organization, the vehicle that they have inherited, got designed, is moving the business along there. And what is actually driving the attainment of that objective, and what's holding us back?
Well, that was the mission objective thing. I agree, absolutely. And the accountability is the key, and ownership of it, and
absolutely key.
Yeah,
absolutely. So where are we going with this?
Apart from Sarah. Government organizations. Sorry, I didn't.
We've talked about accountability being necessary. We've talked about maybe being a bit more systematic about how we manage accountability, and providing people who are accountable or making governance decisions more confident in what they can access in terms of information. We've talked about, well, that's complex because it's not just one node, it's loads of nodes. And therefore, what we're aiming for with the big scenario, I guess, is Alex, Veronica, did you want to briefly mention about this? This is another key big business support driver, I think.
Alex, this is your favorite, I think.
It's not my favorite, but it's high up there. So what we're saying is, we talked about having standardized agendas. We've talked about, I believe earlier or last month, about you have a cadence. So it could be like you have your monthly meetings. You have to have the right people involved. The right agenda is saying, are we looking at the things we need to look at? So, for example, I've put in standardized agendas in organizations to make sure that they focused on risks and issues, because they really didn't want to talk about them. They only wanted to talk about successes and opportunities. So we have the right people involved, the right agendas, which means they're reviewing the right information. They're doing it at the right time. The people who are accountable know they're accountable. We have our core data model underneath. So all the data coming in has the same standards and metrics. We're not comparing apples and pears. It's apples and apples and pears versus pears. That sounds simplistic, but in massive organizations I've worked in, this has not been the case. Dashboards, MIS, so everybody's got the right information. So the rightmost circle is basically, out of that you get the right decisions. But if you don't have the right people, you're not doing it at the right time, you don't have the right agenda, you don't have the right information, why on earth do you think that you would actually be getting the right decisions? So, is that covered enough for you, Mr. Dunning?
I think a key point is that we're not trying to tell people what their agendas need to be or what exact information they need to have. We're kind of suggesting that, well, if we can commonalize some of this stuff, we can make it easier to operate. And if we can get good information, then we can do all the fancy stuff that we talked about with operating accountability and governance, and use the AI to make it easy for us. I think that's the focus here. And maybe this is a little bit, we have to sort of get a bit quicker here, but we've talked about in previous sessions, so I'm not going to go into it in any great depth. We talked about starting to think about how we pull together information, not because we're sort of, again, megalomaniacs and want to control everything. We want to be able to run meetings, make decisions based on information we can trust. So can we uh, build commonality with how we manage risk, where we keep our strategy documents, how we manage objectives, what the business architecture is, how can we get can we commonly use code schemes? Can we refer to Philip Milne as Philip Milne in all of the systems that we work with? We're going to have local tools. We're going to need to prioritize. We're going to need to manage work. Can we pull this together so that whether we put humans at this or AI at this, we actually are making good decisions with it? And again, so that it's how far can we go with this? Well, the answer is clearly you can't go to the nth degree straight away, but you can work towards it over time. And Philip, we've got just a few, I guess, just to briefly just outline this. We can't go into this in depth. We just time.
I've been espousing for quite a while now this concept of a digital business brain, but you put that to one side. I'm talking about an intelligence layer using AI type tools to ingest the shape of the business, what the business does, what the structured data is, what the unstructured data. But the key bit is building the foundations correctly. So knowing who the people are, what their roles are, because everything that you start bringing in after that has got to have an accountable, whether it's a high risk, medium risk, or low risk as to where it sits in the organization. And the purpose of it is really to say, this is the purpose. We need to align our strategy to our purpose, and we need to align our organization to our strategy so that we are brought back to what is strategic planning all about. It's about saying, how can we get this gargantuan organization to move in the right direction? And how can we ensure that the work that's going on down the lines works well? And I don't know if anyone's ever done any sort of business modeling or any of that type of life, but the one piece of advice I would give to anyone who's moving into this is you start off by getting your broad foundations right, and then you look at the one area that is really critical and you build that out in detail. You don't try to do the whole lot. It's not a massive transformation program. I'll go in doing these things, and I'm looking for a 3-month program to gather the basic foundations together. And I'm looking for serious return on investment within that 3 to 6 month period, because it's almost self-fulfilling. Once one area starts to get it and the people running it start to understand it, and other people say, I want a bit of that, and it takes very little time to keep expanding it outwards. Now, I don't deal bigger than mid-market, because the big boys have all got resources coming out of their eyebrows who all know that I'm probably a bit competitive to them, so they don't want to play. So I haven't had a chance to take it into there. But I am talking to a big refinery down in Cape Town at the moment about getting this idea into their whole way of working, because they spend so much money and they make some critically stupid decisions along the way just because they didn't know what was going on. And my month this year on LinkedIn, so this month, my month is all about the cost of making decisions. 54 people, I think, read it that yesterday. So I'm really excited. But it's so important. We're spending 5% of revenue on making decisions, and very few of them are correct. And that's what this is all about. It's about how do we bring all of this stuff together so that we have got the information to make the decisions at the right time. Absolutely. And to quote, I wish I knew what your name was, visibility. We need to see what's going on. We need to see how upstream, downstream of where we are, not just what we're doing. But it's a culture change. It will take.
Who's going to support it? Who's going to drive it? This is one of the things we're talking about with business support. We talked about business support as to enabling accountability, to help us put scenarios together where we can be accountable and operate governance. We've made the context. This is complex. We've suggested that if we can help people make the right decisions, we need to get these things right. And we've started to talk about data as the underpinning need for that. And we've talked about AI as an enhancement to this integration layer. But who's going to pull that together? I don't think it's an IT function. This is, to me, another aspect of business support. It's being able to pull together that knowledge hub, whatever you call it, and getting it to work.
Yeah, don't leave it to IT. I mean, it needs to be more
No,
of a
it's
BA.
no,
Well,
This is
I
not
come from an
IT.
IT background for
no, it's
40 odd
not IT.
years.
This is
You
not
know,
IT. This is business. This is
it
all
is. It
about
should be a
business.
business
And
analyst area. This is
yeah,
business
so I
BA
can't,
area.
correct. And
Yeah.
I don't deal with big organizations. So if I'm not talking to the CEO or the COO, I'm not bothering. I've walked away because I'm just going to waste my time. I need to be talking to someone who's going to make change happen. How do you do that in big organizations? Kind of not my mojo at the moment. I'm not that
Well,
interested because until the head honcho realizes that we're going to get left behind by the people who are using AI properly. And this to me is the key way today that AI is going to really influence how businesses work, not whether they choose Copilot or Perplexity or God forbid what else they do. Um, it's how do we surface the information about how our business is working day to day? How do we get that information so that everyone is reacting quickly to what matters?
Yeah,
so,
some of those
so
things like Copilot are biased anyway. So
well, we're not here to talk about AI, but the thing is, I don't think we can escape it as a capability that an integrating business support function will need to be able to leverage for the business. And had the business analyst do the analysis, who's going to operate it and run it and may take it forwards? It's not the business analyst. So we need that support function to keep hold of this and to own it and develop it, just like everything else in the big. And back to some of the lastly back to some of the points about being hub and spoke and this not being a monolith of a function that makes things work. Where could this capability sit? And this is back over, I guess, just to briefly wrap up on because we're kind of running out of time a little bit. We need to invite those to have some discussion if they want it. Do you want to whiz through this, Alex?
Yeah, so I actually know of an organization who tried to do a number of these things, a well-known brand name in the UK, and they had it under the chief executive's office. The reason being was that it gave a huge amount of power to whichever C-suite person owned this, and the COO and the CFO were famously fighting each other to be the next CEO. That's the scuttlebutt and the gossip of why it ended up under the CEO's office. It will be different for each organization's culture and politics. COO is, off the top of my head, where would be the most sensible thing to put this? You're doing operations, you want to see how change is delivering your strategy and how it will affect operations. So
absolutely.
it to me it always seems the most logical place, corporate politics aside, is that it will go under the COO. I don't think it should go under the CIO, except for the fact that it's a technical function. So if you like, the CIO will make sure that it runs just like the CIO makes sure that the servers are running and the lights come on and all those good things.
They might
You
have
guys,
ownership of standards and process, Alex, as well. That was the
no,
point of the CIO.
yeah, and the CIO owns supposedly information and data. So in that sense, there is a logic, but the outputs of what's coming out of business support and the strategic stuff is going to be the COO. So the CIO is just saying, I'm running the system on your behalf. What do my opinions matter? They don't matter much, but very, very interested to hear what the rest of you have to say.
Maybe we
And
just need to define them
thank,
better. That's all.
thank you for bearing with us as we got through that, folks. We just covered a lot because I wanted to do it quite briefly, just to remind everyone. I know we're running out of time, but Chris, you had your hand up first.
Yeah,
You probably got a million points to raise, I'd have thought.
there were 2 points. One actually just came out of what Alex has put on the screen. There's another option, which is to align it where the objectives come from, which is the board. And that most organizations won't wear that, but that's where internal audit tends to report.
Yeah.
Because there's normally an audit committee in a company which reports to the board, not the CEO. So that's the first thought. The second thought is of complete overwhelm and bureaucracy and how the hell, and this is a reflection, I have no answers other than I have worry beads. How the hell is any organization going to break down the fiefdoms and even understand some of the stuff that we're talking about? You know, this is very much like the enterprise architecture discussions of the late 90s, early 2000s. Almost no organizations who had an aspiration to model their organization through the discipline of enterprise architecture actually successfully did it, because it's bloody expensive and it can't change at the speed that the organization does, whether formally or informally.
I'd beg to differ at the moment, Chris.
I see a complete analog here.
I think we're moving into an area where that last point is certainly possible. And if nothing else, you can investigate an organization and point out how inept it is. I mean, it's not a pleasant conversation to have, and it's one that I specifically try and avoid. But sometimes you get forced into a situation where complacency is sitting there saying, we've got it all. And then you go, right, so I've just gone through in the last half an hour all of your process documentation on these 3 departments, and they have about a 5% overlap. There's 95% failure going on.